This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Good afternoon to you all, and a very warm welcome to our webinar today on the AI Act and what does it mean for Europe's competitiveness. Joyce O'Connor here, Chair of the Digital Group at the IIEA, and it's my great pleasure to welcome our distinguished speaker today, Kai Zenner, who's the Head of Office and Digital Policy Advisor to Axel Voss MEP. Kai, you're very, very welcome. We're delighted that you've taken time out of your busy schedule. You were telling me beforehand that you've had, was it 5 or 7 international trips around Europe and Korea. So we're really pleased to have you with us today, and it's very much appreciated. Great to have you here. So Kai will speak to us for 20 to 25 minutes or so, and then I will go to you, our audience, for the Q&As and using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And please feel free to send any questions or comments in during Kai's presentation, and I'll come to them after he finishes speaking. And it would be great if you give your name and designation when you're asking a question. Thank you very much for that. A reminder that today's presentation and Q&A are recorded and are on the record. And please feel free to join the discussion on X using the handle at the IIEA. The AI Act can be seen as the second generation of digital laws in Europe. In 1020, Europe started this regulatory journey with the agenda for the digital decade and the first generation. For the AI Act, European policymakers took a principle-based and transparency approach to the development of the Act, involving stakeholders, all stakeholders such as business, academia and civil society. The EU has initiated public-private partnerships such as regulatory sandboxes, the scientific panel, the advisory forum, and a cooperation mechanism for stakeholders with the AI Office in terms of a future-oriented and flexible regulatory framework. The AI Act focuses on the entire value chain. Zenner brings a unique perspective to the shaping and the developing of the AI Act. He will discuss the EU's AI Act and outline the risks-based approach, its implications for different levels of the AI value chain. He will also assess what he sees to be the positive and negative features of the Act. He'll have a special focus, as I said earlier, for the implications of the AI Act for EU's competitiveness, including both the opportunities and the risks. He will ask the question, what can we do now to make sure that the AI Act will be a positive success story? And as I think he will say, Kai, the clock is ticking. What can we do as stakeholders now? So the focus is on stakeholders, not just the institutions and the legal aspects. And I think Kai will give us some answers to those questions. As I said, we're really privileged to have Zai with us today. He graduated in political science from Edinburgh and the University of Brennan, and in law from the University of Munster. Before moving to the European Parliament, he worked as a research associate at the European Office of the Adenauer Foundation in Brussels. He is a member of the OECD.AI Network of Experts since 2021 and was awarded the Best Assistant in 2023, going above and beyond his duties as in that position, and ranked placed 13th as one of in the Politico's Power 40 class as one of the top influencers who are most effectively setting the agenda in politics, public policy and advocacy in Brussels. Kai, as I said, is Head of Office and Digital Policy Advisor for MEP Axel Voss from the European People's Party group in the Parliament. He's a digital enthusiast who focuses on AI, data and the EU's digital transition. Currently is involved in political negotiations on the AI Act, AI Liability Directive, e-privacy regulation and GDPR revision. in his individual capacity, he advocates for within the European Parliament and for bringing back the better regulation agenda to EU policy making. Kai, we look forward to your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joyce, for those kind words, and also, for inviting me and for giving me the chance to share a little bit my thoughts and ideas around the AI Act. Indeed, as you said, I was heavily traveling, in particular after the AI Act has been adopted, because Axel Voss, my boss, and myself really felt that it would be good to, on top of the Commission's statements, to give a little bit more insight what has happened, why certain things are now in the final text, also to single out certain problems that could occur now that the AI Act is slowly being implemented. And most of all, what Axel and I in parallel tried to say on all those different events was really that stakeholders should be heavily engaged, in particular in comparison to the GDPR, where in 2018 most companies were really surprised that suddenly there are new data protection rules. With the AI Act, we wanted to tell everyone to start already now to prepare with regard to compliance, with regard to building up certain governance infrastructure, and so on and so on. I will share now my screen because I will show you a few slides. If there's any problems with the slides, just give me a sign, because sometimes our Parliament firewall is making some problems. So now basically you should see my slides. Joyce was already giving a little bit of background, just maybe one addition. I was indeed heavily involved on the AI Act negotiations with my boss from the very beginning, involved in AI policy frameworks, and then in particular on the AI Act as Axel Voss was the shadow rapporteur for the EPP group. And Joyce was also giving already a little bit of background why the AI Act is there, that it's part of a larger strategy. And I want to go even a bit further in terms of, let's call it, historical background of the AI Act, because I think it's very, very important, in particular if you are rather critical with the AI Act, to better understand why it's suddenly there. As I said, we need to go back in history a little bit, because actually the beginning of the whole AI strategy can be found in 2016, 2017. Back then, the European Parliament initiated one report, a so-called own initiative report, where we as Parliament said, look, especially with machine learning, deep learning, AI technologies, there are certain legal problems, certain issues that probably needs a legislative response. And back then, what you see on this slide about digital competitiveness, there was already the realization in Europe that in digital in general, but in particular on AI, the European Union is really lacking behind, meaning that the United States and China in technological terms are far ahead. If you, for example, compare the VC, the level of VC density, and also the amount of money that VCs are putting into AI technologies. Already in 2018, 17, Europe was far behind. We were very bad in commercializing our good research results, and so on and so on. Actually, everything that you have read now in the Draghi report was already on paper in 2018. And China was catching up with the United States and also going more and more away from the state of digital economy or AI economy compared to Europe. The big idea back then was similar to the GDPR, to trigger a Brussels effect, meaning that at least on regulatory terms, Europe could become a leading voice, and internally for our companies could create a competitive edge by establishing a legal framework that brings companies a lot of legal certainty, so that even though in technological terms here and there are problems or we don't have the best technology, at least companies know exactly what to do, what is allowed, what is not allowed, and maybe also be able to create technology made in Europe that is particularly safe, is very good in terms of privacy and so on and so on. This was the origin of the AI Act and of a lot of other legal, digital laws that you saw over the last months in this kind of second wave of digital laws that Joyce was also talking about. What is important, what you see now on the third slide, that those ideas that we are focusing now on, those potential legal gaps when it comes to machine learning and deep learning, is not something that only came up in Europe. Again, with what we try to create another Brussels effect, but different to privacy, where it was really something that was mainly coming from Europe. On AI policy, it was really an international exercise. Already in the 2010s, many of those international organizations and fora that you see in this graphic were actually actively working on the question what machine learning technologies are now posing for risk, what legislators across the world need to do. And they were actually able to conclude, to find an aligned position among very, very different areas across the world, from Canada, United States, even to India and China. What you can see on this slide is, for example, the 2019 OECD principles that didn't stay in this more Western OECD, but actually were adopted from G20, including China, including India. And especially the left side is showing you some more, let's call it, ethical principles that indeed, as I just said, you can nowadays find in the executive order of the United States, in the AI Bills of Rights, in the Canadian AIDA law, in the Brazilian's AI laws, in the European AI Act, but even in the non-legislative AI policies or measures, for example, in Japan, in Singapore, or also in the Chinese AI laws, which is, if you compare to a lot of other areas in the world where we are constantly fighting against each other and not able to align on anything, is, I would say, a rather positive development, and in the future will also help to build up some international alignment, because at least the principles in the, to be fair, very different policy options that different regions took, at least the principles are the same. Where I was now speaking about different approaches around the world, what is really unique for the European Union, and this is going back to my first slide on digital competitiveness that you saw. Europe tried, as I already said, to establish a kind of third way on AI, something that is creating a very, very strict framework or coherent framework, which in the end is giving end users, deployers, but also developers enough legal certainty to use AI, to develop AI, to deploy AI, and to kind of create a competitive edge by building or using something that cannot be found in a similar way across the world. So for example, as I said already, AI technologies that are in particular safe, that are in particular good in terms of privacy and so on and so on. This whole third way on AI was mainly or can be mainly summarized in four pillars. First of all, we wanted to create AI that is in particular ethical and trustworthy. We didn't want to regulate everything with AI, but really wanted to focus based on a risk-based approach on those AI technologies that are in particular risky or not in line with our European values. We wanted to increase the level of safety, make it very clear how liabilities are, who should be liable for what. And even though we have those three very EU unique marks, we still wanted to have strong international cooperation, strong alignment with those principles that you see here on the left side. If I'm now going even more in the specifics of the European AI Act, 3 points are really, really unique and really, spring out if you compare the AI Act with other pieces of AI policy. First of all, it's a product safety legislation approach of the European Union, where we took some mechanisms that worked very well in the past in areas like toys, like radio equipment, like medical devices, and so on. And some things that most of our European companies are very used to because they are already doing CE markings. They know already how to do conformity assessments, to whom to go if they need to do a third-party conformity assessment, and so on. So it's really a kind of ecosystem that is closed in itself, where everyone knows what to do and what is coming. And of course, by choosing something that is so much established, normally the costs, the additional compliance costs should be rather low because you just need to adjust a little bit what you already have in place. So again, by merging those two fields, you are creating just a lot of uncertainty because it's really two separated fields that so far have no experience to work with each other. And you are also now protecting fundamental rights, something that so far was never something that producer needed to consider when they are creating a product. So already here, a good idea, but a big question mark. Also, the second crucial let's say difference, if you look to other AI policies around the world, the risk-based approach, which I said already, is also rather innovation friendly because it only strongly regulates AI technologies that could be categorized either as unacceptable risk or high risk. And by doing that, really focusing on a small number of AI technologies in theory. The big problem here is similar to NLF. It's a very good idea, but in practice, the big issue here is that the EU didn't really do enough research on this point. The Commission created these risk categories, but honestly, they probably just had a feeling that AI technologies in those areas could become risky because some of those categories or use cases that they, for example, listed it in Article 5 on prohibitions or in Annex 3 in the list of high-risk use cases are not really commercialized. So, for example, in border management, there is a lie detector driven by AI technology, and the press has asked all 27 member states, and no one from them is using something like that or is planning to use it. And this you see in a lot of those use cases that are either prohibited in the future or put under high risk. So actually the whole AI Act is a little bit a shot in the dark. And even if you check the risk categories, they are written so vaguely that, yeah, no company is really knowing right now what is actually now, applicable to our specific technology. So also here, unfortunately, a huge question mark. The third and last unique point of the European AI Act is our value chain approach. Again, similar to the two other unique conceptual points of the EU AI Act, also this one is something I truly believe to be very useful in theory. It's actually something the European Parliament pushed very much, because we're feeling that in particular digital laws of the first generation, but also some of the second generation of the EU, we're always focusing on the downstream companies. So those companies that were putting a lot of components together and commercialize the final end product. This would be also the case with a normal NLF approach and the original Commission proposal for the AI Act. So it would be, again, the downstream provider of a high-risk AI system, for example, and the deployer of such system that would feel all the regulatory burden and would be often left alone to become compliant, because there is not even information sharing from upstream companies. And this we in the European Parliament in particular wanted to solve. We created or extended the Article 25 in the final AI Act, but also added the chapter on foundation models with the clear objective to accelerate information sharing along the value chain, to make sure that those companies that would be the focus of AI Act compliance would have all the information necessary, but also would receive some technical assistance from upstream companies. While again, we are still convinced that this is extremely important and very happy that it's in the final AI Act. There is this problem that, it was a very, very swiftly negotiated point, and it's heavily depending on secondary legislation, on guidelines, on the code of practice, on standard contractual clauses that are being developed from the Commission, and so on. All of that is not there. We don't know when it's coming. We don't know if the quality is high enough. So also here, unfortunately, a big question mark. And this brings me to this kind of overview of pros and cons of the European AI Act, which you heard probably already from what I have said, that there is a lot of positive, a lot of negative. Let me start with the positive points. I said already, it's one of the first European digital laws where we really cared about the international alignment, where we really tried to make sure that it's not something too specific just working for European companies, that, for example, that the risk management is very close to those approaches that are being developed in OECD, that are developed by our friends from the US NIST agency, and so on. We also, like it was already being said, have created a law that is rather principle-based, also something that is not really normal for European laws. I spoke a lot about burden sharing along the AI value chain, trying to help downstream providers to have easier compliance. And the last two positive points is that we created a law that is much more accessible and probably future-proof. What I mean by that is that we created a lot of additional mechanisms which allow stakeholders to inform the Commission, inform the national competent authorities about certain needs that or certain technological developments on the market that should be considered in the AI Act and should be taken on board and lead to some adjustments. So there will be constantly new delegated acts, implementing acts, technical standards via Sensenelec will be also adjusted non-stop. So we will really see probably a law that is not like the GDPR being or becoming applicable and then staying applicable in the same way for many years. The AI Act will probably constantly change, which is a good thing because, as we all know, AI technology is something very dynamic. And the AI Act, and this brings me to the negative point, is really one of the first laws that is trying to capture something that is so dynamic as AI. And I talked already a lot about new legislative framework, product safety. There is a big question mark if those very fixated, unflexible new legislative framework approaches are actually working for something that is evolving, is changing. It could happen that if we are strictly applying NLF concepts, that it would mean that companies would need to do new conformity assessments non-stop. They would need to adjust their technical documentation all the time and so on. We also created, another negative point, a horizontal framework for AI that is colliding with a lot of existing legislation that is partially, at least, also regulating AI. For example, GDPR, for example, DSA, for example, Platform Work Directive, but also sectorial, medical device regulation, machinery regulation, and so on. All those laws have also their own enforcement bodies, governance bodies. And what we are afraid about is that there is, at least in the next months and next years, a lot of competition or unclarity how those legal frameworks, how those governance mechanisms will work together. As I said already, a lot of parts in the AI Act are also rather vague, unclear procedures. The risk case, high-risk cases, the prohibitions are blurry. It's not really clear what is meant. And this means, in summary, the AI Act is a big step forward. We are really trying out a lot of new things in order to create much more future-proof laws. But unfortunately, in the basics, or when it comes to the basics, writing a law that is very coherent with existing law, writing a law in a way where the language, the wording is very clear, there we unfortunately as legislator failed and left a law that is, at least right now, creating way too much legal vagueness. Because I already, at the very end of my time, very shortly just over a few points that I still wanted to make. Also, when it comes to governance, we created a lot of new approaches. We created a lot of expert groups, as I said already, that should be very helpful in order to keep the regulator updated, to change certain things if the technology is changing or the market is changing. When it comes to the governments in the Commission and very likely also in the national member states, it is unfortunately the case right now that the governance structures there are very outdated, and therefore, together with Sebastian Heinzleben from Sensenelec and a professor, I created this overview for a future AI office, which would be more capable to cover something that is so dynamic like AI. We were talking here, as you can see, about agile working, taking a little bit those project teams from big consultancy or law firms, thinking about a strong leadership that is not political, that is internationally very active, talking about openness, so involving stakeholders, being very clear with steps that are happening. Unfortunately, right now, in reality, it's not looking like that. In certain parts, the AI office made also major improvements, but from our, let's say, more bolder vision, it's still far ahead. And as I said, two other problems that I just wanted to visualize is really all those overlaps with existing legislation that are partially already covering AI. I mentioned already what are the negative side effects, but in this slide you see this high number of applicable laws, 87 in June 2024. It's now already more. And I think for most companies, it's really a nightmare to navigate at the moment through this field, especially if in this slide you see that there is also a complete unclarity which actor is now actually the entity that you should reach out to. Because, for example, on finance and AI, there are strong arguments now to say that it's still the ECB and EBA and other financial authorities who are on the lead. The AI office from the AI Act will, however, say, no, it's us who are responsible. And with all of that, to my last slide, and then I'm finishing, if you are now remembering what I said about Europe trying to create a legal framework that is bringing strong legal certainty, allowing our companies to create AI technologies made in Europe, it's something that we really tried that could maybe still be the case in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but where we, my boss Axel Voss and I, are extremely worried about is really this period in between, from now until we figured out how the AI Act is working. Why we are so concerned? It's mainly those 4 bombs that I painted here or draw up here. First of all, we really are afraid that most companies will hesitate and invest in AI or to develop AI because of all this legal uncertainties that they don't really understand how to interpret the AI Act, and in particular German companies don't invest if there is not legal certainty. We have those legal question marks that I was talking lengthy about it. If the law is actually working for something so dynamic like AI, if the evidence was strong enough for the AI Act, maybe the third bomb, it's also creating a situation where even those companies that are willing to take a risk to invest, to develop AI, cannot really do it themselves, but that they need or they rely on very expensive third-party conformity assessment, auditing, certification, which again makes Big Four accounting firms very rich, but would definitely stifle innovation if it means that without those huge additional costs, you cannot really develop it on your own. And the fourth bomb is, especially in the first months and years, we really don't see how the European Commission and especially smaller member states are finding enough AI talent for their own governance authorities, for their own AI agencies, or however they are calling it, because competition is fierce. AI experts can get a lot more money if they are working for companies like Microsoft and so on. And the Bulgarian National Competent Authorities is, of course, in competition with those large tech companies. And honestly, I don't see right now how a country like Bulgaria will find a sufficient number of AI experts for a sound mechanism on the national level. And already for the Commission, it's a huge problem. And so far, the building up of the AI office is extremely slow, and they are much behind the original schedule. So this is another bomb that actually the public authorities are not able, at least at the beginning, to fulfill all of their plans that they had. So sorry for being over time, but this would be my presentation, and I'm looking very much forward to the questions. And on this slide, you see my contact details. If we don't talk about your questions, you can gladly also send me something after our event.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.